Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I am going to talk about container and presentational components pattern. So some people tell this as a container and presentation components pattern. Some people tell it as a smart and dumb components and even controller component and pure component. So all are different names, but we follow the same principle for all this. So don't confuse with the name. And the benefit of this pattern is by this principle we can make our code more readable, more testable, and maintainable. So what you will learn by this video, if you will watch this video, you will able to understand what is a container and presentation pattern, and so many companies are using this pattern in their Angular projects, and you will able to understand how can we pass the data from parent component to child component using input property, and how can we trigger the action using the output. For example, if you will have any button click and on that button click from child to parent we want to trigger any action, so how can we do this? You will be able to understand this, and I will also show how we can use the async pipe. So now let's understand the difference between container and presentation component. So number one difference is the presentation component is responsible for how things look. So, for example, if you are having one form which contains multiple text box, drop down, etc. So all that HTML markup we will have in the presentation component, and our container component will responsible how things work. So, for example, you are having that form which is having text box and drop down and one submit button, and once you click on submit button you are going to save the data in the database. So that saving part, that service call and saving the data in the API, that responsibility we will have in the container component. uh, let's take another example. If you are having one grid which is showing the list of the employees, and how we will show that list, that grid, that responsibility we will have in the presentation component, but how we will get the data from the API, that responsibility we will have in the component container component. uh, Presentation component will have HTML markup and CSS styles, because we all that UI part we will work on the presentation component, and container component will have little or no HTML and CSS style, because all that form design, grid, all we are doing in the presentation component. And we will have no dependency with the rest of the app, because like saving the data in the database and that service call we are doing in the container, so we don't need to inject that service in our presentation component. We just need to pass the data or get the data from the container component, and container component will have responsibility to save and get the data from the API. So we will have injected dependency in the container components. So let's take a code example, and I'm going to use that to-do application which we developed in the Angular basic video series. You can find the link in the description block. So let's start. So this is our to-do application, and I'm going to apply this container and presentation pattern for this two component, which is to-do component and save to-do component. So this to-do component.html will have a list of the to-dos and as a grid. So as we can see that all the UI code we are having in this to-do component.html, so we can say this to-do component as a presentational component. And if you will see the code, so we will have that injected dependency in our presentation component. So we have to remove this injected dependency, and we need to move this code to our container component. So let's quickly create a container component and move this code to container component. So let's create a container component for our to do, and Let's navigate to this, and I'm giving a name as a to do and suffix with the container, and let's enter. So my to do container component is ready. Now let's start adding a code. So first we can remove this service dependency from presentation. So let's select this service dependency and move this to our container component. So let me edit here. Now let's add the import statement as well. So to do service, from here I can cut it and I can paste in the container component. Similar way, let's take a date pipe which we don't need in the presentation. So let's move this from presentation to our container component. So let's paste it here, and also let's go back to presentation, and I can take this to do's method from presentation to container, because getting a data from database is responsibility of a container component. So let's move this here, and also let's call this method from container on init. So let's paste it here, and one more thing which we need is the variable. So let's keep this variable here as well and paste this in the container component. So I can paste it here, and let's import our to do model. So let's quick fix and import it. So that's all. We have successfully moved our code from presentation to container. So now our container component will be the parent of our presentation. So I can copy this selector, and let me open our container HTML, and I can edit that selector here. So by this, we are calling the to do presentation component as a child of container component. Now my question is, we are not getting any data from our for this to dos, but we are displaying this to dos in the grid. So how will we will get the data? Yes, correct. We have to pass the data from container component, which is a parent of our to do component. So how can we get the data from parent component to child component? Yes, correct. Using input. So let me add input here, and let's add this input in our container HTML. So here I can add this property under the bracket, like this to do's and to do. So this is our input property, which is we are having in our presentation component, and this is a property we should have in our container component. So let me show you what property it is. So this is this to do's. So we are passing this to do's from our container component to our child component, and our child component is having input property. So now suppose instead of we are passing this array, we want to pass observable, right? So I will not subscribe here, and directly I will assign this observable which I am getting from get to do service method. I will assign this to our to do's, and I will pass this observable in my HTML. And here I can use async pipe, and this is a pipe symbol, and here I can write async. So what it will do, this async pipe will responsible to subscribe my observable. So if I will add my async pipes, so I will get array of to do's in my child component. But as of now, as I'm subscribing directly in my container component, so I don't want to use this async pipe, so I am removing this. So let's remove this and save our changes. Now one more change which I have to make is I have to go to our to do module, and here instead of our presentation I should call my container component. So it should be to do container component. Yeah, and now let's run our application and see if grid is working as it was working before. So let's open a browser, and now I can see my grid is working as it was working earlier. Now let's create a container component for our save to do component. So let me type this, and yeah. So my save to do container component is ready. So let me open this, and let's open our presentation component. And the first principle is I should remove this service dependency from my presentation component. So let's remove it from here, and let's paste it here. Let's add the import statement also from presentation. So let me cut this and paste in our container component. Now let me go back to our presentation component, and let's move this service call from here. Or let me copy this complete code first, and let's paste it in the container component. And I can remove this code, and let's add one variable in our to do model. So this should be type of to do. Now again, let's go back to our presentation component, and here I can remove this service call, right? Because we are doing this in our container component. So let's remove this. And now once user click on save to do, so I need to call my presentation component, which is container component, and I need to pass this to do model. So save to do is a child of container component. So how can we pass data from child container to parent component on some action? Yes, correct. We can use output. So let's add the output property here. So let's add output here, and let's give name save to do click, and here I will use event emitter, and what we are going to pass the to do model. So this is a generic type, so I can assign to do model type here, and make sure you have imported that event emitter from Angular core. So I can see that I imported from wrong places, so I was seeing the error. Now let me come back and let's see that quick fix. So I can see that I have that Angular uh, core having that event emitter, so I should use this one. And let's save our changes. So here we just declared this save to do click, but we have to use this and to pass the data from child to parent component. So let's add this code here. So I can say this dot save to do click dot emit, and I can pass this to do module here. So by this we are passing our parent child component data to our parent component. Now let's go to our container component. So here in this variable I will get the data which we are passing from here. But after subscribe, I want to reset my form and I want to set this value, which is I am having in my child component. So how can I access the properties of child component? Yes, correct. We can use view child here. So let me quickly add view child property here. And what is my child name? It's a save to do component, right? So let me give it here, and let's say it is a child, and let's define the type of save to do component. And here I can say this dot child dot to do form dot reset, and this should also be this dot child. This is also child, and this should also be this dot child. Now let's make our presentation component as a child of our container component. So let me quickly see the selector. So this is our presentation component selector. So let me copy this and open our container component HTML. So this is our container component HTML. Let's remove this code and now let's paste it here. So now my presentation component is a child of my container component, and we can see that we are having this output property. So on this click event, I want to call my parent component method, right? So let's say copy this, and I can add this output property like this. And which method I want to call? Let me see this save to do method. So let me edit here, and I want to pass the model, so I have to add event here. So by this we are passing the model object to our save to do component. Now last change, let's change our route to call to use our container component. So let me open this to do model, and similar to this I should use uh, save to do container component. So, and also I need to modify my guard also. So let me open my guard, so I can see that I am using this save to do component, but now we are having save to do container component. So save to do container component, and then we will not have this form directly. This is a child. Uh, uh, this is child of my container component, so I can add dot child here, and yeah, that's all. So with this change, let's see if my changes are working as it was working before or not. So let me run my application. Let's open the browser. Let me log into our application. Let's go to do and let's navigate to save, and let me add container presentation demo task. Let add is a personal. Let's give start date as a today's at number date, end date maybe 10th, and let's save this. So I can see that my record is saved successfully as it was working before. And let's make this form dirty and let me try to navigate. So yeah, my guard is also working fine. So I can even verify my new record in the grid, so I can see that this new record here. So my both the pages are working with the container and presentation pattern as well. So before we end this video, quick recap what we learned today. So Today we understand what is a container and presentation pattern, and also we see that how can we pass the data from our parent component to child component. So we saw that we were having the to do component as a child component, and we created to do container component as a parent component, and then we pass the to do array from our child component to parent component using a input. Also, we see how can we use that async pipe to pass the data, and that async pipe job will be to subscribe to my observable. And also we checked how can we pass the data from child component to parent component using output property on some action, like we were having a form, and on the form save click we used that output property, and then we emit our to do model to our parent component. And also we checked how we can access our child component methods and property using a view child. So that's all for this video. I hope you like my video. You can like my Facebook page, and you can join my Telegram channel as well. You can find the link in the description block, and in my Telegram channel I am posting some quiz questions, so you can participate for that as well. Thank you for watching.